So, it is anybody's guess, because peer-to-peer traffic is quite hard to actually measure precisely. But at any particular point in time, even to right now that we're talking about, millions of users are probably sharing files online. And the general guesstimates at the moment are that peer-to-peer is actually now responsible for the majority of all internet traffic. And this also supports significant criminal activity, because it provides an easy way in for attackers to get into your organizations, and many things that generally people don't think about. And there's a lot of human factors involved here as well. And we'll come into that. This is an earlier analysis, so the traffic since has grown, but back in 2002, peer-to-peer accounted for 20% of all internet traffic, and within a year, it had actually doubled. Okay, and though there has been quite a lot of crackdowns on things like Napster and so on and so forth, but other things have sprung up. Things like BitTorrent and so on, that actually loads and loads of people use to try and gain access to generally music and other stuff, but and videos or films, but also quite a lot of illegal material. So the threats that peer-to-peer can pose to an organization, as I said, it is kind of very obvious, because there is an obvious security threat that if you're downloading material from a peer-to-peer network onto your, say, your work PC or a laptop that you take home from work and then bring back onto the network in your organization, then there is the obvious risk of viruses and Trojans. Your machine can be compromised and malware can sit on it for a long time. And in many cases, again, hackers and people who have any interest in gaining access to data from an organization will try to put out material there that does look quite genuine, looks innocuous in terms of you're only downloading a music or a video file, but that will have viruses or Trojans embedded in it. Okay. There is also really lots of potential for data leakage, because many people actually, they don't know how to use these peer-to-peer networks and the actual application that you use to share stuff. So many times you see that people accidentally share loads and loads of stuff from their hard drive, which they wouldn't intentionally do, but they just don't know. So they go, well, I want to share stuff, because things like BitTorrent would require that you also share for you to be able to download. So to share, you share your hard drive, and if you do it, just make small mistakes, you can actually share all of your hard drive, which means that all of a sudden you've shared a lot of confidential data with everybody around the world. There is the whole legal side of it, that 90% of material that is found on these networks is actually illegal. It could be not just copyrighted material that you shouldn't be downloading, but also sexual content, and in many cases illegal sexual content as well. And generally, in most cases, the access provider actually bears the legal responsibility, so it kind of provides exposure to the organization on the legal side. And also there is the kind of bad PR that comes from finding that your employees may be downloading all sorts of strange stuff from the internet. There is the cost. For small organizations, it can mean a lot, because people are using bandwidth from your network traffic. It could be interfering with your critical business services. Loss of employee time, for instance. People are sitting there browsing peer-to-peer networks and downloading stuff. They're actually not doing something useful. Okay, and of course, there is all sorts of network costs associated. And as I said, your reputation is at risk, because your organization is being broadcast on the internet. Okay, and people can see that somebody from your organization is actually sharing this material and actually providing access to potentially confidential data. So here are a few examples. As I said, I really loved the keynote this morning, because I thought there were quite a lot of interesting examples there, and that kind of set up my talk quite well. So this was a study by people at Dartmouth a couple of years ago, and what they found was that there was around about 2,000-page document containing social security numbers, dates of birth, insurance information, treatment codes, and all sorts of healthcare data of about 9,000 patients at a medical testing laboratory that was just available on a peer-to-peer network. It's because somebody in the organization was actually on a peer-to-peer network for other purposes, again did the same thing, tried to share their files from their machine, and ended up sharing confidential data from the lab. My favorite one, however, has got to be this one. There was a very sort of big deal news that hackers from China had actually hacked into the Pentagon and tried to steal or stolen plans for the Joint Strike Fighter. They actually shouldn't have bothered. They were available freely on a peer-to-peer network for a long time anyway, because somebody in the Pentagon has been sharing their hard drive and sharing the details of the Joint Strike Fighter. And these things continue to happen. They get into the media, and then people realize that this poses significant risk. A Pfizer employee actually installed again a peer-to-peer network on I think it was a laptop that she was given, and she would take it home and she was using it, and she shared all the social security number and personal data of about 17,000 employees from the company. Okay. With everybody around the world. So, and these are not isolated instances. These are happening in big companies. These happen to individuals. These happen to small companies all the time. So there are different ways to try and get around it, or try and gain some handle on peer-to-peer traffic that comes out of an organization. You can do three different things. You can do network level tracing, whereby you deploy a monitor on your core or gateway network infrastructure. Okay. In this case, you're doing kind of packet level monitoring. You're basically seeing all the traffic that goes out of your network. It has a big advantage because it's transparent. Everything that goes out you see, so you can see what is going out and what is who is sharing what. However, the disadvantage is that it does require people to come in, have access to your network infrastructure, change things on it, and also it's very location specific. So if you have multiple locations of in your company, then you may have to actually install things in multiple locations as well. There is the passive application level tracing that you can do. In this case, what you can do is you can actually modify the pairs or the front ends that you use to share material via peer-to-peer networks. And in this case, all that happens is that you're doing at the application level, you're checking what goes out, and that is being monitored. Again, it's quite transparent. You don't need to change the network infrastructure, because you can actually go and just change the actual software that is being used to share the material. You can basically do it from anywhere. However, it's quite a small level of trace data that you're getting, and you only see what goes out from a particular machine. And if somebody is not using it, then they will be quite easily able to bypass it. There is the kind of more active application level tracing. So it's very similar to the passive approach, but in this case, what you do is you have a peer, which you should think act as a dummy participant in the peer-to-peer network, and what you do is you use it to actively search the peer-to-peer network for the kind of material that might be being shared or being shared from your organization in order to counter the security threat. You don't need any access to the network infrastructure. You can do it externally, and I'll show you what we have a system that utilizes this approach and can do it externally. You're not tied to any physical location, and you can actually get lots more trace data from the network and actually do it. It is not transparent because you are actually influencing the network. People can see that you might be actually trying to grab information from the network. And also, in case of things like BitTorrent, where you're required to share to actually get stuff, you also are required to share stuff out. And it tends to be very protocol specific as well. So you do need to have different monitors for different protocols. So what we currently do is we use this kind of approach in our P2P observer system. This effectively non-invasively analyzes the exposure of organizations located anywhere in the world on a particular peer-to-peer network. Okay, so at the moment we can identify about 1,000 organizations per week, and we can increase. So we've seen quite a lot of sort of big names on peer-to-peer networks over the years, and I'll show you some examples of that as well. We use a combination of the passive and active application level monitoring that I was talking about, and it really depends on what an organization wants to do, the type of network, the objectives, etc., etc. We cover a lot of the major networks at the moment, things like BitTorrent, Nutella, basically anything that's based on LimeWire, OpenApp, and so on. So this is kind of an overview of what we do. You've got a number of sort of peer-to-peer systems. Our monitoring technologies just go and deploy on them and analyze them. If a specific organization is looking for their exposure on the peer-to-peer network, then we can narrow down onto it, and I'll show you how. We do quite a lot of processing on it in terms of looking at the kind of names of files that are being shared. So we do quite a lot of text processing on the queries that we pick up from the network, and the kind of distribution that has been going on, who is sharing from where, which particular location in the company, and so on and so forth. And then we can do kind of nice reporting for our customers as well. So here is an example of how we do it. So this is more kind of what you would call directory-based peer-to-peer networks, things like BitTorrent in this case. So here is your sharing user who publishes something on the peer-to-peer network saying, I have it. So for example, the latest, I don't know, Britney Spears video or whatever. And there is your searching user who is wanting to look for it. And this is really kind of a directory structure in the sense that all this information is available, and what we like to think of it as kind of yellow pages out there. And what we do is we just really go in from time to time and grab a snapshot of these yellow pages, because of course these vary depending on who is online and who is sharing what. But we grab a snapshot, and from that snapshot we can actually do an analysis of whether a particular organization or a particular kind of group of IPs are actually sharing something. So this is kind of very, very straightforward. There is the more kind of active and passive application level tracing, a more kind of hybrid approach. So things like Nutella, where we effectively have a fake peer that sits there and it sort of grabs the queries that go out, float around on the network. The principle is very much the same, but for instance, if you've got a searching user who says, well, do you have file X? It kind of routes through our peer, and we sort of grab it, and we know that somebody's looking for file X, and then subsequently when somebody replies, yes, I have it, then we know that somebody is sharing that kind of information. Of course, the slight disadvantage of that is that if it never comes to our peer, then we don't see it. So the coverage is not 100%, but then 100% coverage is quite hard to do in this. You have to deploy quite a lot of peers to try and get anywhere close to that. But we still see quite a lot of traffic despite not being 100% coverage. So just to give you an example, this is, I don't remember the actual timeline for this, but this is actually quite interesting. We did this analysis, and this is HSBC actually. And as you can see, there is quite a lot of copyright material being shared out of HSBC networks in this analysis. There is a bit of pornographic material as well, but quite a lot of bandwidth is being used by people just sharing material out of the HSBC network and downloading stuff on a peer-to-peer network. Now, you can also do things like daily breakdowns of number of files that are being shared. So this data is a couple of years old now. And as you can see, there's sort of big spikes on a particular date, and I'll come back to that as to why you get those big spikes, and they're quite interesting analysis that you can do. So you can do daily breakdowns. You can also look at kind of 24-hour spread of activity, and in this case, what you can see is that things kind of peak at about the lunchtime hour. Okay. So, but people go, well, I'm having my sandwich on my desk, I might as well actually, go and download some stuff from a peer-to-peer network and so on. So you can see that things start to peak around that time. And the interesting thing to look here is that really, I mean, these are people who are actually doing it in peak work hours. So you see virtually nothing out of peak work hours, not somebody staying on afterwards to try and do it. Okay, and this is the kind of things you can see that people have been sharing or downloading. So Whitney Houston seems very popular for some reason. No idea. But also, what we found was that you can also have sort of illegal content. So this is actually child abuse material that's being shared out of somewhere in the US, in fact. So, where did we go? Okay, so you can also do other kinds of analysis. So we were asked by the Irish broadcaster RTE to do an analysis of child pornography material that is shared out of Ireland only. Okay, so we did this analysis for them. This was featured in their documentary last year, and as you can see, this is the kind of so we narrowed it down by country rather than by a particular organization, and in this case, you can see that there is some illegal pornographic files, and specifically the child abuse files. There are sort of other files and copyrighted files which they didn't particularly care about. So they were more interested in the illegal pornography and the child abuse files for their documentary. We also looked at FTSE 100 companies where there was loads of illegal material being shared out of them, and as you can see, around about 30% of FTSE 100 companies were actually sharing illegal material out of their networks, and the number actually goes much higher. Over 50% of Fortune 100 companies, we saw this trend as well. Okay, so it is quite intriguing to see that it happens in large organizations as well. This was just more kind of an accidental thing that we found, but it was very, very interesting that there is the effect of viral media on peer-to-peer usage. Okay, so these are the earlier analysis that I've been showing you. This is for people who are kind of doing it on a regular basis. We see them on a regular basis sharing stuff from their organization's network or downloading stuff via peer-to-peer networks. This is really shows that actually there is the occasional user, and that provides quite big risk. So this, I actually don't remember what the exact file was, and I don't know if Phil does, but on the 6th of April, there was a file that sort of went around, and I think it was some kind of celebrity sex video kind of thing. And the word got around, and the sort of traffic peaked very quickly. And there were people who just kind of came online, looked for the file, downloaded it, and went away. Okay, not to be seen again. Now, that's the highest risk. And as we were hearing in the keynote earlier, that's the kind of thing that can actually create quite a big security threat, because if there is a file out there, people are keen to go and download it, then they will take the risk. They will go onto peer-to-peer network. Many companies actually frown on their employees using peer-to-peer networks. And in this case, employees clearly thought that it was worth incurring the wrath of their employer by going onto peer-to-peer network and downloading, and also thinking, oh, who is going to notice, right? If I just go on for 10 minutes, I download it and I'm off, right? But the risk of that is that might have had quite a lot of malware embedded within it, and many times that's actually the case. So we also have done kind of other studies on peer-to-peer networks. As I said, one of the things that we do is we also build child safety solutions and work quite closely with law enforcement agencies around the UK, but also internationally. So we did a study on, this was done from the School of Computing and Communications before the company was formed, and we found that 1.6% of searches and 2.4% of responses on the Tele network alone were related to illegal sexual activity. So not just child abuse material, but illegal sexual activity. And this may not seem a large number, but given the scale of the network, that basically means hundreds of thousands of searches per second. And extrapolating this means about 600,000 searches per day of people not looking for regular pornography, not looking for videos or music videos or whatever, looking for illegal sexual material that would legally be classified as illegal. Okay, so these are the sort of search frequency of the popular 100 most popular terms that we saw in that study, and these are the kind of things that people were looking for. These two underneath here are child abuse terms. By the way, I also should point out, please don't go and search for these because the police will come knocking at your door. Okay. Recently, we've been focusing a lot more on the threats that come from online social media to individuals, but also organizations. It's a big risk for example, schools. Social networking sites such as Facebook and MySpace are constantly under the spotlight because people go and use their infrastructure to engage with young people and engage in sexual activity with young people. So our recent focus has been quite a lot on identifying risky content within chat data that exists on in online social networks. The key thing we have been doing is to identify when people try to groom children online by undertaking content analysis. We can do a lot of things, some fairly simple things, so you can pull out names, things like when people have used sexual terms and so on and so forth, but also we can do with a high degree of accuracy, we can actually detect the age and gender of the people in a chat. And that has been quite useful in, for instance, for schools, for example, trying to understand when people are pretending to be children to gain trust of young people. We've also sort of heard quite a lot of sort of similar stories from kind of online romance frauds, but also online radicalization forums that people use, misrepresent themselves to try and gain trust of their victims, or the people whose trust they're trying to exploit. So we have a number of things that we have done, and I'm not necessarily going to go into details of that, but I'd be quite happy to talk about it if you wanted me to. So we've got a forensics toolkit that is used by law enforcement agencies, and there is a mobile phone app that is available on the Apple App Store, so you can go and download it. It's a cut down version of the more sophisticated analysis that we do, which allows children to sort of see if they're talking to an adult or an adult pretending to be a child. And we sort of provide an analysis service for used by third party, for example, security suite providers, for both sort of kind of home users and organizations such as schools. We've had quite a lot of media coverage actually from this. It was featured on the BBC a couple of times, and a number of international media outlets as well, specifically because we did some work in schools where we went in and the pupils actually talked to people behind the scenes. And half of those people behind the scenes were children, but half of them were adults pretending to be children. And then we asked the children, can you tell us who you were talking to? And they could tell correctly only under 20% of the time. And compared to that, what we can do is we hit accuracies of well over 90%. So that is actually quite interesting. We also do work with police, where we run training, for instance, with undercover investigators who go online, for example, pretending to be children in online sting operations. And one of the key things we do there is actually try to train them to pretend to be children better. And I do not exaggerate when I say this, that we get them right first time, every single time. Okay, so we can actually do this quite well. So really, I guess sort of the purpose today was really to highlight, as I said, given the sort of nature of the event today, was to highlight the risks file sharing can pose to an organization. Okay, and it is the non-traditional mode of peer-to-peer file sharing that poses these risks and what kind of issues it brings. I talked a little bit, of course, from our own perspective, because that's our experience of the kind of core forensics technologies that we've been developing and how we've been using them to actually look at the kind of threats that are out there by, for instance, looking at file sharing networks, but also on identifying risky content. If you want to see more about what our technology does, then please feel free to go to our website, but also I'll be quite happy to answer any queries now or by email, and my colleagues are here, Phil and Paul as well. So I think I'll stop here and take any questions. Thank you.
On your peer-to-peer network, is there anything that companies can do to track down the source of their copyrighted material, or is it just a question of finding out what's being shared? So if an employee is accidentally sharing material they don't want to, can a company using your technology find out
which employee and which machine? Yes. So the simple answer is yes. I mean, of course, there is the usual concern there that, you know, depending on the company's policies, I mean, somebody's job could be at risk effectively. But yes, I mean, we can pinpoint, you know, narrow it down very quickly as to individual machines as well, as to who is doing it. Yes. Other questions? No. Okay, so well, I suppose then we can stop. I think I've stopped on time. I was told I had about half an hour, so that sounds about right. Okay. Well, thank you very much.